policy. Any rebroadcast of this forum must be done in its entirety. The format for today is as follows. The candidates will be asked pre-screened questions in rotating order. All candidates will have the opportunity to answer each question. Each candidate will be given a set time to answer each question. After all candidates have responded to a question, a rebuttal will be allowed but not required by each candidate. After the question and answer period, the candidates will each give a brief closing statement. There are 4 candidates in the New Jersey Congressional District 3 general election. 3 of them are with us today. The candidates present with us today are Andy Kim, David Richter, and Martin Weber. The 4th candidate, Robert Shapiro, who is not present, has submitted the following statement. Again, the following is a statement from candidate Robert Shapiro. I am dedicated to protecting the principles identified in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, which protects the natural rights of the citizens of the United States. Issues for the 2020 election. Make China pay for the damage done by COVID-19. The more we learn about the origins of the coronavirus, the more compelling the case against China grows. Chinese doctors and scientists encountered COVID-19 patients as early as November 2019 and promptly alerted authorities. But Beijing clamped down on their efforts to research the virus and notify the world. Beijing also allowed large numbers of its own people to enter and leave Wuhan, despite knowing of the risk to them, and even after cordoning off Wuhan from the rest of China. It permitted foreign travel that soon spread the virus to other countries. Yet as Washington and American states continue to fight the pandemic, there is almost no campaign to hold China accountable. The United States and other nations must hold China accountable, not because of anger, though that sentiment is clearly justified, nor a desire for retribution. Make English the official language of the United States. On August 13, 1982, Senator Hayakawa of California introduced an amendment to immigration legislation, Senate Bill 2222, in support of English as the official language of the United States, and that no language other than the English language is recognized as the official language of the United States. Upon leaving the Senate in 1983, he said, in his support of a common language, bilingualism for the individual is fine, but not for a country. Protect Social Security, Medicare, and reform healthcare system. The Social Security reserves will be gone by 2035, and our healthcare system needs reform. I will work in Washington to protect, preserve, promote, and ensure the financial security, health, and the well-being of current and future generations of maturing Americans. This is the conclusion of Robert Shapiro's statement. We will now begin with the submitted questions. And the first person to respond is Martin Weber, and the first question is, it concerns the right to vote. What federal policies and practices would you support to ensure that every citizen has the ability to register, vote, and have their vote counted? Improve and secure elections, including the prevention of foreign interference. Martin?
We need to make it easier for the people to acquire the paperwork just so they can get registered, especially these seniors that can't get out. I really truly believe that since you need a driver's license, you need a license for everything else in this world, that we should have voter ID cards so we can keep track of who is voting. I believe we should update our county records a lot more than we do. The people that are on the list, I've worked many polls down here in Barnegat Township, and to still see them years, 10 years after they passed, and they're still on our voting register list. It's not right. I received a ballot in the mail for someone who's been passed away, and it's just, we need to update the whole system, and we need to get more people in the county to just look at the paperwork and fill it out, update it for the people. It's not right to see these people that are passed away on the ballots, and the voter ID is a big thing, I think, anymore. You need it for everything else. why not for the voter ID? The taxpayers want that. The people in America want that. And it's always just politics that are stopping it. We need to listen to the people. We're here to represent them. We're here to be their microphone and speak. It's just not happening now. And maybe someday we can get enough people in there and really just work at the voter registration and get a group there set to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
David Richter, the right to vote.
Thank you very much. Voting is fundamental to our democracy, and every American citizen has the right to vote, and we ought to make it as easy as possible for people to register and to vote. I'm in favor of absentee ballots, so people having the option to mail in their vote prior to election day. They shouldn't need a reason. There should be no fault absentee balloting. But I've heard a lot of negative feedback on the campaign trail from people that don't trust the current system, the all vote by mail election that Governor Murphy has put in place. It certainly makes it easier to vote. There are people that don't want to go to the polls, but they should have that option regardless. There's two important reasons why I think we need to return after this year to our normal election process. One is Americans are used to seeing the results of the election on election night. And we have no idea how long it's going to be before Andy and I and Marty find out who won this race, before we find out who our next president is going to be. It could be weeks, it could be December before we find out. With machine voting, we have the ability to figure out who's going to win and deliver that news to the American people as soon as possible. They have an interest in doing that, and we have an obligation to make sure that's the case. Second is that there's a tremendous amount of mistrust on this vote by mail process. People are worried about their votes being stolen, being lost, being misplaced by the Postal Service. And if they don't fundamentally agree with a fair process, it undermines our entire democracy.
Thank you. Andy Kim?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for hosting this forum. I really appreciate everything that the League does. Mr. Richter, great to see you. And Mr. Weber, thank you for your service to our country. I think that I agree with my opponents here that we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to be able to support the right to vote, that this is such a fundamental part of our democracy, and it's important that every single person has that opportunity. And I think that we've seen a lot of problems before in past elections where we've seen voter suppression, other problems with taking people off the ballot rolls. This is something that we've been trying to address. We've had legislation that we've passed through in the House of Representatives to try to address these issues. For instance, I think we should be moving towards automatic voter registration, really just trying to cut out some of the hurdles that people are experiencing when it comes to getting that right to vote. If it is, in fact, a right to vote, then it is something that we should try to make as easy as possible. I agree that we need to make sure that, especially right now, we're ensuring that people can be safe and also be able to vote. You don't have to choose between your health and the right to vote. And there's ways that we need to do to try to improve that. That's why I've supported being able to have increased funding to the Postal Service during this time to be able to make sure we're standing up, first of all, for an important public institution and a public service, but also something that's fundamental to our ability to ensure that this election goes as smoothly as possible. So those are some of the steps that I've supported.
Thank you. Next question. What policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our communities? Do you support the Black Lives Matter movement? And we start with David Richter.
Thank you very much. I think we can all agree that Black Lives Matter. Our country is built upon equality, equal opportunity for all, equal justice under the law. And while America is not perfect, one of the great things about our country is that there's always room for improvement. We're always striving to make things better. And we need to make things better for all Americans. So I commend people who have protested peaceably earlier this year and continuing through today to make this world a better place, to fight for equal justice for Blacks, for everybody, because it's truly something fundamental to me and what I believe in. And there's no question that we can make things better. What's troubled me is it seems like the recent protests have been taken over by another element, the Antifa groups that have used the legitimate protests for racial justice as an excuse to commit violence, to commit crimes, looting and rioting, smashing store windows and burning police cars is not what the movement for racial justice is all about. I would love to see an end to that. I think we should be standing up for our police. The police are not the villains in this. 99.99% of our police do a great job under very difficult and dangerous circumstances, and they ought to be commended, and we ought to work harder to make sure that they can do their job better.
Thank you. Andy Kim.
Well, thank you for this question. It's so important, one that I've heard from so many people in this district. Absolutely, Black Lives Matters. And this is something that I've had the ability to stand alongside people at some of these marches in our district, peaceful gatherings where we can make sure that our voices are heard. And as I talk to people in the community, I've gone out and really tried to understand the different challenges that are confronted when it comes to systemic racism and inequality. It's not just about law enforcement. It's about racial disparities when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to racial disparities when it comes to starting a small business and other aspects of that that we need to make sure that we're addressing. Working alongside my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus, moving forward with the Justice and Policing Act, which is something that's coming up with practical steps for us to address these issues and really try to make sure we're meaningfully taking this on in the way that it needs to. Change needs to come. But when I go to these marches, what I also see is that I see our local law enforcement often marching alongside those of us in the community that are there. And that's something that I find extremely important. What we need to do is make sure that we're coming together, that we have that dialogue, that this is not about false choices. We don't have to choose between safety of our community and addressing systemic racism and inequality. And this is something that I'm committed to working with our community on, whether it's with our young activists that have been stepping up and mobilizing, and working with our law enforcement, making sure we can keep our community safe. And that's something that I'll continue to do.
Thank you. Steve Weber.
Marty Weber. I think that all lives matter. It's not just Black lives. It's in America, it should be all lives matter. It doesn't matter who you are. Everything across the line should be fair for everybody. And some of these things that come out, I think there's a lot of politics behind some of it that really blows it out of proportion. And I have many Black friends. I have Black friends that come to me every day. And I ask them if they feel that it's unfair for them. And they say it's not. It's just that we need to make it fair straight across the board for everyone, whether it's in business, it's no matter what you're doing. It just doesn't seem, it's always a political reason to bring up the different fights and arguments, and it's not right. Let's just make it so it's all lives matter in America, and we treat everyone, no matter what color, what nationality, or no matter what you are, we treat everybody fair right across the board, and that's the way it should be in America.
Thank you.
And can I have an opportunity for a rebuttal on this question?
Of course. Go ahead, David. Richter.
I was very glad to hear Congressman Kim talk about the fight for racial justice does not necessarily mean vilifying the police. Because I very much support our men and women in blue. I was disappointed, though, that he voted for a bill in the House this summer that would remove qualified immunity from America's police officers. That's a provision that protects them and their families from potential bankruptcy, because when they have to make a decision in a split second, and it's later second guessed by a committee or even by a judge and a jury, it potentially puts their entire lives at risk and potentially bankrupts their entire family.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes. Andy Kim, rebuttal?
Yeah, I'll keep this short. Well, look, it's about finding meaningful change to be able to have accountability and transparency in that process. And this is something that, again, we're working on as a community. And I've talked about this with local law enforcement. And I'm glad to get the support of the Fraternal Order of Police in this election, showing that I'm looking out for our communities and safety, especially when it comes to law enforcement, while we're also making sure that we're able to address these issues of systemic racism and inequality. So this is something that I'll continue to work and try to bridge and have that dialogue.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, next question. Kind of take off of what we've already been talking about, but do you support the House police reform legislation and the 2018 Civil Rights Commission police reform recommendations? Why or why not? Andy Kim? you're first.
Well, picking up where we left off here, absolutely, working forward with the Justice in Policing Act, I thought this was an incredibly important step for us to take, for us to be able to talk about where we can have that transparency and accountability when it comes to law enforcement, when we can try to make sure that we're committed to having local law enforcement be able to drive a lot of what they are doing, but also setting left and right parameters, like trying to ban the use of chokeholds or other tactics that would potentially block a windpipe. These are real tangible steps that are aimed at addressing the challenges that we've seen. And look, is the Justice in Policing Act going to change and fix the systemic racism and inequality in our country? It's not going to. This is a step forward, though, a way for us to try to make sure that those that just have been waiting for so long for the change in the community and change is that they are getting that and they are doing that. But this is also a way for us to recognize that we need to have safety in our communities, that we are trying to work with law enforcement, trying to make sure that we can continue to find a way forward to do that. And that is what I'll continue to fight for while I'm in Congress.
Thank you. Martin Weber, next.
With the law enforcement, I think we need to bring the people. We need to put the police with the people. We need to let them know who they are. There's just too much fighting in this world right now. The cops are needed. The cops are very important for the safety of everybody. Cops can be our friends. Putting the cops in the schools to let the kids know who the police are. It's a lot of separation with everything in the way the world is right now. It's just a sad situation, I think. But cops are very important. We need to fund the cops, not defund them. We need to maybe act with the training on how they can act out in the field. But nobody really knows unless you're in that situation where, what are you going to do? Maybe it was needed to hold that guy that way. Maybe it wasn't. But we really don't know that because we're not there doing that. And in my mind, the cops are lifesavers. We need them. We need to support them. And we need to show that we really care for those cops. And we need to do anything we can within DC to tell the cops that, yes, you are needed and we want you there, and fund them the right way and train them the right way. That's what I feel about going on with all this stuff with the police.
Okay, thank you. David Richter.
Thank you. I was very honored in August to receive the endorsement of the New Jersey State PDA. They endorsed only Republicans this year. And the reason for that is because today's Democratic Party does not stand with our police, unfortunately. There's no question that we can and should do things to reform training of police officers to make them better at doing their job. We need better communication among police forces so that bad police officers, if they're forced to leave or are fired from their position, just don't go across the state or to a different state and get rehired. We need to get rid of the bad apples. There's no question about that. Certainly qualified immunity is something that's very, very important to police officers. And I hear about it constantly when I'm talking to our men and women in blue. It's important for their protection. Again, Congressman Kim didn't vote for that. He voted to take that away from our nation's police officers. We need to make sure that we are not defunding our police. They actually need more funding, given what we're seeing across our country, the violence and the looting and the lack of respect for the rule of law. Our country is built on the rule of law. It's built on law and order. And we need to make sure that our communities are safe. And there's no question that defunding the police does not get us there.
Okay, thank you. Next question is within the same lines. It's about gun control. What steps should be taken to curb gun violence, mass shootings, and other gun-related deaths in our communities? Please detail the gun safety measures you would support, if any. And we start with Martin Weber.
On the gun safety, I think that you need a license to drive a car, you need a license to be an EMT. Why can't we do a training for people? Maybe the NRA could come up with something where they train these people on proper safety procedures with the weapons and so forth, and train them how to shoot the guns. It's just it's too easy to get a gun today. We need to do more background check, mental background check on these people. And if we had some kind of course going on in the NRA, say use retired police officers, retired military guys, and the red flag was popped up, we'll catch them ahead of time. But it's just too easy for the guns to get thrown away. They should be more serial numbers on stuff like that and more control of where these weapons are. There's too many bad guys on the street. They don't go through anything to get something legal. They get it the way they want. And we just need to stop the guns, the loose guns, for being out there. I'm a big hunter. I love to have my shotgun. I do my hunting with it. And it's not right that we'd be able to lose that. We just need to control it. We need to do more training and just more mental awareness with some of these people that, like, hey, there's a red flag. This guy shouldn't have one. And then look into it. Just get it off the internet. So there's no more gun shows and things like that. We don't need that. Go to a gun store to get your gun. And that's the way it should be. There's too many easy ways to get them now. We need to stop the easy ways.
Thank you. David Richter?
Thank you. I'm a very strong defender of the Second Amendment. I think Americans have a fundamental constitutional right, law-abiding citizens, to own firearms for hunting, for sport, for collection, or to defend themselves, their families, and their homes if that situation were ever to arise. But I also am the father of 4 daughters, and I'm very disheartened when I have them come home and tell me that at school they had to do an active shooter drill. They shouldn't have to live in that kind of a world. Parents shouldn't have to live in that kind of world. And I do believe that our government not only has the right, but the obligation to do everything it can to make sure that guns don't fall into the hands of criminals and the mentally ill. And there's no question that our nation has seen some terrible violence. We need to do what we can to stop it.
Okay, thank you. Andy Kim.
Well, look, I agree that we need to do everything we can to stop it, but it's about taking real action. When I hear from people in this district about violence that they've experienced, lost loved ones that they've lost to gun violence, they want real action to be able to address them. That's something that we need to take forward. We all 3 of us, we respect the Second Amendment. I respect Mr. Weber and what he was talking about the importance of responsible gun ownership. And I think that's an important part to frame on this. But we also need to make sure that we follow through with the universal background checks for gun safety, something that I passed through the House and very proud to be able to do that. Close those gun show loopholes that Mr. Weber talked about, and the selling of weapons online that allows for the loopholes to be able to persist so people can get weapons even when they've been turned down in person at a gun store. These are huge problems. I also think that the high capacity magazines, the ability for people to be able to shoot, we've seen it in the massacres in all across this country. These are real tangible steps, but look, I have to say that my opponent, Mr. Richter, is someone that opposes a lot of this. He continues to push forward in this way that I think is very dangerous for our community. That's why he received an A+ rating from the NRA. He's the only only candidate in the entire state of New Jersey that's endorsed by the NRA this year. And I think it's because they know that he's someone that's going to stand in the way of universal background checks for gun safety and these other issues that we know are necessary.
Thank you. Next question. What impacts of climate change on our health, economy, and national security most concern you? What climate warming policies are you prepared to support? Do you support the Green New Deal? And if not, do you have an alternative plan? There's a lot of questions in that, but the basic thing is we're talking about natural resources. And David Richter, you're first. If you need me to repeat it, I can.
There's no question that climate change is real. It's occurring. And that man-made activity is contributing to it. We've burned a lot of fossil fuels in the last 175 years. The solutions that I've seen from people like Congresswoman AOC, the Green New Deal, I'm not in favor of. I think that is a huge, huge overreaction. It's a $90 trillion expense that this country can't afford. It would bankrupt American industry. It would completely destroy the way of life that we know it. I think that at some point, technology is going to give us alternative solutions to burning carbon, to burning fossil fuels. And we need to do everything we can to invest in and advance those technologies. But what I also hear a lot from environmentalists that that are endorsing the Green New Deal, like the Progressive Caucus that Mr. Kim is a member of, they also are not in favor of nuclear power. And nuclear power is one of the best solutions to climate change because it doesn't throw off carbon dioxide into the air. We're not burning fossil fuels. It's clean energy. And we need to advance that. The same people that are in favor of the Green New Deal are not in favor of nuclear power, which I find really problematic. But I'm in favor of technology as a solution, and I expect that that's going to be the case over the next couple of generations.
Thank you. Andy Kim?
Meaningfully addressing climate change begins by recognizing that it is a huge problem, that this is a national security crisis. The fact that I have to say in this day and age that I believe in science and I believe in facts, because we know that there are people that are propagating falsehoods when it comes to climate change. And that's something that this district knows firsthand, the challenges of climate change. We got crushed by Superstorm Sandy. I still talk to families that are still not back in their homes after years since that storm. So we understand what's happening out in Ocean County, where Mr. Weber lives. There's flooding on a regular basis, even on sunny days. There are real changes that we need to meaningfully address. And I agree that we need to make sure that we're thinking about this pragmatically. I'm not someone who supports the Green New Deal because I want to make sure that we can try to find real bipartisan solutions to it, real practical, tangible steps to address this, like making sure that we can find energy efficiency efforts to be able to move forward on energy of the future, which will create a lot of good paying jobs here in New Jersey and across the country. But what my opponent, David Richter, has consistently done is, he supports pulling us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, something that I think is a disastrous step backwards, something that puts us in the league with Libya, Iran, Iraq, South Sudan, Eritrea, Turkey. These are the only countries in the world that have supported this policy that Mr. Richter supports. And I think that that is something that clearly is not in line with science, clearly not in line with the direction that our country should be going.
Thank you. Martin Weber.
I think we need to start looking at the atmosphere just as people. Look what we're putting into this air. Look what we're ruining. It's eventually something's going to happen. And I'd hate to see it really happen where it just ended this world. We're too lax on emissions and all that stuff. Even like the solar, I've been talking with a lot of people. Why don't we just make that part of the building code so we can get some decent energy for these people? And the global warming is just, it's going through the roof right now. It really is. And if we don't get a hold of it and we don't watch what we're doing in this world, we're going to ruin this world for our grandkids and such. It's just, we need to wake up. We really do. We need to start putting our heads together a lot more. It seems like we just argue back and forth of what to do. And it just never seems to get anywhere from anywhere. Nobody wants to do anything. It's just argue, argue, argue. The solar, I think, is a good thing. Just add it into the building code, add it into the homes. The emissions on stuff is just awful now. And I just pray to God that we could put the people together to really just work on the global warming and come up with a plan that's going to work and save this world. Because if we don't, it's bad for the grandkids.
Can I have a rebuttal there?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Solar and wind are great technologies that help us create power in a way that doesn't impact the atmosphere. But the sun doesn't always shine, and the wind doesn't always blow. And we've seen in California, all sorts of rules and restrictions on their ability to create power. And you have now in California rolling blackouts. People can't rely upon their own energy company to provide electricity on a steady basis. And we have a governor here in New Jersey that wants to model our state after California, and that would be a disaster.
Thank you. Next question. 3rd Congressional District constituents already pay a high price for climate resilience projects. As most CO2 pollution is emitted by oil and gas companies, do you believe the fossil fuel industry should be held accountable to pay its fair share of these costs? Andy Kim, starting with you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad we can dig into this a little more. Well, I remember I was really encouraged just not too long ago. Pope Francis gathered together the top CEOs of the major oil companies, ExxonMobil, BP, Occidental. They also invited the top finance companies from Wall Street and elsewhere. And they all sat down and they all worked together on a statement where they talked about the importance of carbon pricing as one tool in a broader arsenal. Is that going to alone fix the problems that we face? Of course not. You know, we need a comprehensive strategy to be able to address climate change, whether it's also making sure that we're moving to electrify our transportation sector and other steps, again, that can be building a lot of great jobs, like making sure that America continues to be the global leader of the energy of the future. So all of this needs to come together, but we need to make sure that we have that comprehensive strategy, that we have that agreement. And I was encouraged by the fact that the top leadership of all these different oil companies, fossil fuel companies, were saying this. Now it's about holding them to those words, making sure that we can have real action to be able to address that. But I think that that is a step forward and hopefully something that we can build upon.
Thank you. Martin Weber.
This is all new to me, and the oil companies are controlling a lot of areas and stuff, and they're not regulated the way they should be. There should be more regulations on what they're doing, how they're doing it. And these big companies just seem to get over on the American people. I say the American people, I'm talking about the United States. They just seem to, they get away with so much. And us smaller ones, we're trying to save this world. We're cutting back on everything. And the big companies are really, they're not helping us. There's a lot of things that we should change, put these organizations together and come up with something that's going to be better to burn as fuel. And in America, we're smart enough with all these scientists and everything. We can come up with ways, but they're just never brought out to the forefront so we can do it. And everything just seems to stay status quo. And we need to get out of that in America and move on. We need to smarten up. And it's coming. It's coming. The help's on its way. I know that. And we're going to make it a better place. And it's just a matter of time. We've got to do it for the grandkids.
Thank you. David Richter.
Yeah, you know, it always sounds good when Democrats want to vilify big corporations, especially big oil companies. They have lots of money and they're easy to vilify. But the reality is whenever we impose taxes or regulation or additional costs on these companies, they're not the ones that have to pay. The consumers have to pay. And if we put big taxes on Exxon and Chevron and all these big companies, you know, they're just going to pass that cost on to the consumer, and we're going to pay higher prices, you know, at the pump, driving up costs for consumers who just got a tax increase here in New Jersey on their gasoline prices. To me, is not the answer. Over time, we will develop new technologies to replace what's happening. We're seeing tremendous development in electric automobiles. I think Tesla now has a market cap about 5 times that of GM and Ford combined. That's because they're on the cutting edge of technology. And I think that's where we are headed. We need to do things to phase out the dirtiest fossil fuels and use cleaner fuels that pollute the environment less and have less of an impact. But I can tell you the Green New Deal is not the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Do you believe that the federal government should ensure that every American has health coverage? What is your position on the Affordable Care Act and maintaining coverage for pre-existing conditions? If you would repeal the ACA, what would you replace it with? If you would repair the ACA, what changes would you make? We'll begin with Martin Weber.
Oh, on the health care, we could go a lot of ways. I think that the medicine lobbyists, the hospitals, everything, they're controlling this world with the health care. Health care should be a privilege for everyone to have, not just the elite. Even in the Veterans Administration, it's the system's broke. Our system for healthcare is just, it's the worst in the world, if you ask me. There is nothing out there for people. If you have pre-existing and they're going to drop you, that's not right. If you have it, they should be able to sell it. We should be able to go across state lines and buy things in Florida. If I live in New Jersey, insurance company down in Florida, I should be allowed to go down there and buy that policy, and we're not. The Obamacare that they still have out there that's they say is working, it's not working. Me as a self-employed landscaper, I still go week to week on paychecks just as a self-employed, and it's to afford that. It's not, you can't do it, these people like me. It's hard. We need to fix it so everybody has it. And if it's pre-existing, that shouldn't even be a question for their insurance policy. They're just a person, they need help. And the healthcare places are just, they're controlling everything. And it's not fair for us people. It isn't. We need to fight for healthcare for across the board for everyone. Especially we can start with our veterans, get them their health care because they don't have it either. And we got to make it fair.
Okay, thank you very much. David Richter, next.
When I was the CEO of a company, we had thousands of employees, and their healthcare was very, very important to me. And we provided absolutely best-in-class healthcare to our employees. And that included even when prescription drug costs got way out of hand. We self-insured a prescription drug plan for our employees, so they wouldn't have to go out of pocket for medicine that they or their families needed. That was critical for them. We were told 10 years ago that Obamacare was going to fix the healthcare system, and it clearly hasn't. Just less than a decade later, we've got Democratic presidential candidates over the past year and a half that were talking about Medicare for all, which is essentially socialized medicine. We're told Obamacare wasn't a step towards socialized medicine; it was the fix. I am not in favor, and I've said this publicly, of repealing Obamacare. I think there are things that we can do to improve it. There's no question. I believe in market-based solutions. For example, we should have insurance companies that can compete nationally. It shouldn't be a state-by-state market. The more competition we have will drive prices down and will drive quality up. That's very important. Actually, Marty raised a very good point. The healthcare we provide to our veterans, to me, is an embarrassment. It's gotten better. President Trump put in VA Choice, where every veteran could have a card. But I've talked to veterans that had to drive, and still do, 100 miles and pass half a dozen hospitals on the way to a VA hospital that they're required to go to. That's a problem we absolutely need to fix.
Thank you. Andy Kim?
When I think about the challenges facing healthcare and what we need, I often think about my father. My father was a baby when he had polio, and it was an illness that stayed with him, changed his life, something that caused him an enormous amount of disability over the course of his life. And he always taught me that for him to be able to get a job, get an education, he needed to be able to manage his disability, manage his illness. Healthcare is important. Healthcare is a right, and everyone in this country should have healthcare. Now, how we get there is something that we need to be able to talk through and find really pragmatic solutions to be able to do this, and hopefully in a bipartisan way, which is why the very first bill that I introduced in Congress was a bipartisan healthcare piece of legislation with Congressman Fitzpatrick, a Republican from across the river over in Pennsylvania, where we tried to make sure that we are moving forward to address issues like the state health exchanges, which I think are proven ways for us to lower costs. So those are real tangible steps that I've tried to take to be able to do this. Also, lowering prescription drug costs, making sure that Medicare can negotiate these drug costs. I also passed legislation that would give every person on Medicare vision, hearing, dental coverage. These are very pragmatic and tangible steps that can improve people's healthcare. But when we talk about the future of healthcare, we can't help but understand that the Affordable Care Act could very well be repealed by the Supreme Court just days after this election, as they're going to be hearing this. And this is something that worries me tremendously. I disagree with President Trump's efforts to gut the Affordable Care Act, and I worry that David Richter is not going to stand up to that when push comes to shove.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something on the choice program that Dave brought up. President Trump did sign an executive order on there, but it does not work. I have sitting right here in front of me a bill for my life partner of $3 million. He'll be dead 3 years this November 5th, and that hospital still this day has not been paid. I went to 5 different hospitals this summer in my local area, 1 in Philadelphia, and not one of them knew what the choice program was. The veterans have, in my mind, zero health care. It does not work. I made an appointment in March 22nd of this year, and it's in November was my appointment date. How is that just possible? It's the system's broken. It's not working for the vets at all. We need to start there. And I know I have a plan that I could put up, and it will fix the VA healthcare system and save millions of dollars for the American people.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone
And
else?
I can also add something.
Sure.
I ran out of time before and didn't fully answer your question, but I want to make it clear to the voters that I absolutely will stand for protections so that nobody loses their health coverage because of any pre-existing conditions.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Discuss the failures and/or successes of the federal response to COVID-19, particularly in New Jersey, which is among the states hardest hit by the pandemic. What additional financial assistance programs do you support for those who have lost jobs or income? Will you advocate for more federal aid to school districts and critical services and to provide a lifeline to small businesses? David Richter, we're starting with you.
Thank you. There's no question the state has been particularly hard hit. The pandemic, when it hit the United States, started in the Northeast and spread from New York City into New Jersey. And people and families have been dramatically affected by the virus itself and by the economic fallout. Congress put in place a $3 trillion COVID stimulus package earlier this year that provided support in all sorts of ways. I think one of the best programs was the Paycheck Protection Program, which gave support to businesses to make sure that they didn't have to fire their employees when they were ordered to shut down. They could continue to pay them and make sure they had paychecks coming in so they could provide for their families and pay their bills. I think it's important that we extend that program. Right now, Congress has reached an impasse between the Democrats and the Republicans. Republicans, I think, have a reasonable bill in front of the House that continues the PPP program. Right now, Nancy Pelosi is playing politics with that and is holding that up because the Democrats want to put a whole bunch of things into that bill, hundreds of billions of dollars of things that have nothing to do with COVID. And I think that's wrong. We shouldn't be playing politics with people's lives. But I would absolutely extend the Paycheck Protection Program. I think the federal government has done the right thing in providing funding. I think the states are the first line of defense. And I think our state acted appropriately in the spring to stop the virus.
Thank you. Andy Kim?
The coronavirus crisis has been the top priority for me, as I know that this has been the top priority for this community. And the federal government has failed us here in New Jersey. When we were hit so hard at the very beginning, I tried to advocate for a third test site for us down in South Jersey and the shore, places where we can go to get tested, but it was the White House that blocked that. And that's something that I'll still never forget because we were in a time of need and the White House said no. We need to continue to make sure we're pushing forward, but when we are thinking about how it is we can address the coronavirus crisis, the first thing is that we need leadership that takes this seriously. And this is where I differ from my opponent, David Richter. He is someone who said that the worst is behind us, not listening to medical experts that are telling us about the concerns of a second wave going forward. He's someone that advocates for opening up everything in our state, including mass gatherings, concerts, festivals. I think that is enormously risky. And he himself is someone who doesn't wear masks when he goes about, even when he's indoors with other people. I think that's a terrible, bad example. I'm glad that he supports the Paycheck Protection Program that me and others worked on in a bipartisan way to support our small businesses. Right now, we absolutely need to get a second round of that small business package, but we also need to make sure that we are getting state and local funding back to New Jersey to be able to help us get through this crisis. And again, my opponent is someone who has specifically said publicly that he opposes federal funding to our state to be able to help us, whether it's with schools, whether it's with protection and personal protective equipment. And I think that is enormously dangerous. And I want to see us go in a different direction.
Thank you. Martin Weber.
Oh, we definitely need to go in a different direction. The Paycheck Protection Plan, I applied for that multiple times and I got nowhere with it. And it was like, who can get it? All the business owners, the small business owners down here in South Jersey, the people that I know, nobody's got the help yet. We've applied to the banks when they said that it was going to open up on the such and such day. We were right there and it was already done. It was taken care of. So we really don't know where this money went. And it's a political game, I think, again, with some of these people, like to open up Walmart or a Home Depot, but you can't open that little mom and pop store. It just don't make sense to me that you can't have people, if they were taking the precautions with the mask, the cleaning of their places, the limited of number of people. Why can't we do the smaller ones when they do these big corporations? Everything's about the big corporations, and us small people, small business, we aren't getting anything. And I'm a small business owner. I've applied multiple times and I got zero help from the government or the state. Zero help. And my friends are the same way. We don't know what to do. I want to get to DC because I want to help this mom and pop business here. We need to start helping them. I think it's because these big corporations are just paying their way in DC as lobbyists and stuff. And we need to stop that and just make it fair across the board. It shouldn't be more for this one and less for this one. It should be fair across the board. And it's not that way. We need to look at it more and get it done.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Discuss why you do or do not support comprehensive U.S. immigration reform, including DACA. Andy Kim?
Well, I absolutely support comprehensive immigration reform, including protecting our DACA dreamers. And that's something that I voted on to make sure that we are supporting them through this all. When I think about comprehensive immigration reform, we know that this is one of the toughest, most controversial issues that are out there. But just a few years ago, we had the Senate pass bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform with 68 senators voting yes for it. 68 senators. I can't imagine actually right now 68 senators agreeing upon anything right now, but that was just a few years ago. It is possible to be able to do this. And this was a bill that had more money for border security, which I support. I've supported strong border securities and making sure we do that as someone who's worked in national security my whole career. But also ways with a path forward for DACA dreamers that was in that bill. And this was something that got 68 votes in the Senate. I believe that is still possible. If we get past the divisions, just get past the vitriol and the partisanship that is getting in the way of a solution, I really do think it's possible. Did anyone get exactly what they wanted? No. But that's what it means to govern. That's what it means to have adults in the room working together for common cause. And I hope that we are able to move past this moment where we just see how clouded our vision is getting because people are trying to set up these false choices that we can only be caring about security. And if we are, we're not thinking about what we can do for immigrants to this country. That is something that we can do both of. As a son of immigrants married to an immigrant that wants to be strong in national security, it's possible to do both.
Thank you. Martin Weber.
National security is strong. We need to protect our borders. We need to keep the criminals out from our country. But for the people that do want to come in, that want to be honest and citizens of America, it's too hard for them. It's just way too hard. It takes years and years for someone to become legit and stay in America. I have friends that have worked for me where they were born here in the United States as a Mexican. Their parents weren't, but they were. One guy, his mom's been here 18 years and she's still not legal and she's trying. She just can't get it done. There's too much paperwork, too much junk in it. We need to start working with them, make the whole process easier to let them become citizens and be proud Americans. I had talking with a group, why can't we have them in the military? Let them join the military and spend 3 years, and after the 3 years they discharge from the military, they're US citizens, they're good people, they can learn our language. And we're not doing enough for the immigrants at all, I don't think, in America. It needs to be looked at, and we need to really help the good people that want to come in here, help them become part of us. And it would be just so nice to see that ever happen. And if you want to live here, be legit, be legal, and help America. And it could be done, but we're not doing it yet, and we need to.
Thank you. David Richter.
Yes, you know, our nation was built on immigration. I'm the descendant of immigrants. We're all the descendant of immigrants. And the fact is that our immigration system today is broken. It's not working. And I think that we do need bipartisan compromise in Washington on immigration reform. I support a Dreamers program. I've talked to people who were brought here, you know, illegally, but as babies or young infants, and they've spent their entire lives in America. Some of them only speak English. They don't know any other country than America. I think to send them back to a place they don't know, where they speak a language they don't speak, would be an unbelievable hardship. And I think one of the most important things that we have to remember is government can act with a very heavy hand. We need to make sure that everything we're doing when we're dealing with people is done with compassion. So I think there's room for compromise. I've been astounded that you know, the Republicans and the Democrats in the House and the Senate have not reached compromise. You know, illegal immigration is a very serious problem. I think we have room for more legal immigrants, and we can talk, you know, a myriad of ways of improving that system, but we have to stop illegal immigration. And until President Trump made this a you know, an issue 4 years ago, nobody was talking about it. We had 100,000 immigrants a month illegally crossing from Mexico into the United States. That needs to stop, and we need to stop using people as a pawn in political disputes on Capitol Hill.
Thank you. Next question. What programs and benefits for active military, veterans, and military families do you support? Martin Weber, goes to you.
Oh, I support anything we could do for the veterans. They serve this country. They fight the wars for this country. I was a proud Army soldier. I was proud I served this country. What do I get from the military? To be honest, zero, nothing. The healthcare system is so broke for us veterans down here, and it gets worse. And I was told something by a full-bird colonel. He's working in the VA system. He says, Marty, what they're doing for us is they wait for us to get really ill and pass on. And I thought he said that as a joke. And he looked at me and he says, Marty, I'm dead serious. And years go by, I think he's right. They don't do nothing for the veterans. There is nothing. I would love to see the homeless veterans have an area to go to. I've been trying to do that in the state of New Jersey, and I've been fought down by the Pinelands Commission. It's the veterans don't get nothing. It's zero. I'm a veteran myself. It's zero for the veterans. When I get to DC, I promise the people from the bottom of my heart, I will fix the problem with our veterans. Our veterans will be taken care of when I become the leader in this 3rd district. I'm running this from the heart. I lost my best friend because of the VA healthcare system. My mind, they killed him. He didn't die from something. He was killed by the VA healthcare system. And I'm still sitting here with his bills and other things that they didn't do for him. They didn't do for him. The choice program is broke.
Okay, thank you very much. David Richter?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that this is a very important issue across the entire country, but especially here in the 3rd district. We've got the Joint Base that employs 40,000 people, and many of them are veterans or will be veterans in the future. In Ocean County, we've got the biggest county in the state for retired veterans. We need to do more for them. The healthcare system that's provided to them, you know, is terrible. You know, I was very upset to find out a few months ago that there was a planned new VA health clinic that was scheduled to be built in Ocean County, and that project got canceled. And you know, under Congressman Kim's tenure, he sits on the Armed Services Committee. He should have been involved in making sure that that project didn't get canceled. I read about you know, a strongly worded letter he sent after the fact to the VA to complain about the decision. But again, he didn't get involved early enough to make sure that that project moved forward. And I can guarantee you that as the congressman for the 3rd district, I will make sure that the VA builds a new clinic, because the clinic that's existing right now in Brick is outdated and is inappropriate for the veterans that use it. We need a whole series of reforms at the VA. the quality of the healthcare that they provide. And I know I came out of a business that was involved in construction. The VA is a terrible builder of hospitals and facilities. It requires tremendous cost overruns and schedule delays constantly on their projects. We need to do everything we can to change that system and change it for the better quickly for our veterans.
Thank you. Andy Kim?
Well, all three of us recognize, and I'm sure we all agree, that we need to make sure we're doing better for our veterans. This is something that our country must keep that promise, that if they serve our nation, protect our families, the promise is that we will have their back and support them for the rest of their lives. And that is something that Mr. Weber, as he was saying, has not been happening. And certainly we need to make sure that we have a new veteran health clinic in Ocean County, but that doesn't start by coming up and making things up here. It's not canceled. It's very dangerous to tell veterans and others that it's canceled. The Trump administration, VA, has delayed it, yes, and we are going to hold the VA accountable for that. And this is something that Mr. Weber understands. He's seen the failures of the VA under both Republicans and Democratic leadership, and this is something that we need to make sure that we commit to, not use it as a political ploy. Another issue I just want to raise, as I've been a member of the Armed Services Committee looking out for our military, whether that's me visiting our troops out in Afghanistan or working with the base. But one issue that's very important to me is about making sure we're looking out for military families. We know it's not just the service member that serves, it's also the family that serves. We have military spouse unemployment at 25% in our country. That was before the pandemic. I introduced and passed into law, got President Trump to sign bipartisan legislation that I wrote with a Republican member of Congress on the Armed Services Committee, supporting our military spouses, making sure that we're looking out for them. So those are real tangible things that I've been trying to move forward on, and I commit to doing so as long as I'm in Congress.
Thank you.
Can I make a follow-up statement?
Yes, of course. David Richter?
Yeah, Congressman Kim talks a lot about bipartisanship and helping our veterans. I was very disappointed because I met a veteran about 6 months ago who told me a story that he had some issues with the VA, and he reached out to Congressman Kim's office. And when they were taking down his information to follow up with him, they asked him whether he was a Democrat or a Republican, which I was shocked that they would even ask a question like that. He was shocked as well, but he answered it. He wanted to be as open and honest as he could. When he told them he was a Republican, they said thank you, and they never got back to him. They never helped him. And he had to go to someone else's office for assistance. So I think that kind of stuff is just completely inappropriate.
Okay. Martin Weber, I thought you had your...
Yes. Both Dave and Andy said that they were talking about the brick hospital and it should have been built. That would have been the worst thing to do because the ones that we do have now, they don't work. So why are we going to add another one? Because that's not going to work. But under my plan and what I want to do for the veterans healthcare, it will work. It's going to save the American government, the American people, billions of dollars. The system's broke. We need to change it. We need to fix the choice program so that does work. And the soldiers and the veterans should just get an ID card. Go to your local hospital, local doctor, as long as the government pays the bill. That's what we really need to do for the vets.
Thank you very much. Andy Kim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Mr. Richter here because I really wanted to think about what he just said there. The accusation to my staff saying that they are politicizing what is essentially the most critically important part of my job, which is delivering for the constituents of this district. We've helped over 4,000 constituents, including hundreds of veterans. And not a single time, I can assure you this, and I promise you this, has not a single time has my staff asked someone if they are a Democrat or Republican. If you really think that that is how I'm conducting this office, I assure you that is not the case.
Thank you. Next question.
I just want to say one more thing.
No, David, I'm sorry. We're going to go on to the next question. If you have anything to add to it, you can do it in your closing.
Of course.
All right. Do you think that wasteful government spending exists? If so, what specific government spending would you cut and what savings do you expect? And we start with David Richter.
Thank you. It's almost like asking if the Earth and the Moon exist. Of course, wasteful government spending exists, especially at the federal level, where we are spending trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars every year. We have under normal circumstances, we've been running $1 trillion annual budget deficit. This year, we're at a $4 trillion deficit and probably going higher as we approve more COVID relief. Our national debt Just a few years ago, topped $20 trillion, and it's heading to $30 trillion in a very short period of time. And again, as the father of 4 teenage daughters, I care about the kind of world that they're going to grow up in, and I'm worried about the economic future of this country. I want them, I want my family, and I want your families to have the same economic opportunities that we had. And I just feel like nobody in Washington, and this is true on both sides of the aisle, truly care about the disastrous position that we're putting this government and our entire country into by spending. There's a tremendous amount of waste. Congressman Kim talked before about the $3 trillion that the Democrats want to push through for COVID relief, that it includes essentially blue state bailouts. States like New York and Illinois and California that have done have created their own problems over the years through complete lack of fiscal discipline. And now they want the federal government to step in and bail them out. Well, the federal government doesn't have their own money. They use our money. These are taxpayer dollars. And they want, the red state taxpayers to subsidize the blue state governments that engage in wasteful spending constantly and have for decades. That's just not right.
Okay, thank you very much. Andy Kim.
Well, I'm someone that wants to make sure that we have an effective and efficient government. And having worked in government as a career public servant under both Republicans and Democrats, I certainly agree that there are places that we can be able to save ways to make our government more effective. But I just wanted to respond to something that was just said. Here in New Jersey, we pay more than our fair share. We only get back 81 cents for every dollar we put into the federal government. We're getting screwed over here. And I think that trying to get support back to our state, especially during a national security crisis like the coronavirus crisis, is a really important step. So this is about our fair share, that we are giving more than $20 billion to the federal government every single year. We have been for years and years and years, while other states like Kentucky gets back over $2 for every dollar that they put into the federal government. So this isn't about blue state bailouts, it's about fairness. It's about making sure that we are getting people in New Jersey their fair share. Do we like subsidizing other states around this country? No, none of us do. So we just want to make sure that we are getting our fair share, and that's what it means to be able to work for an effective government that is working for everybody. And that's why I disagree with my opponent, David Richter, about his position opposing federal funds back to our state, especially during a crisis.
Thank you. Martin Weber?
Yes, there's a lot of wasteful spending, and one of the biggest ones is within the politicians. I'm running for a seat within Congress, and you could sit there 2 years and then you're paid the rest of your life. That's ridiculous. We need to stop that. The political world is really taking a lot of money too. Then you can go off onto the other little things, even state level. They did sidewalks down here in the Pine Barrens. They go to the woods. They dead end right there at the woods. What is this? They said that's government spending. We had to get that money spent or we don't get it next year. It's wrong. There's a lot of little things, but I think if we could start with the political world, the politicians, and when their time is up serving, their pay is up. We're going to save billions and billions of dollars because it's not right to pay them to sit 1 term, 2-year seat and pay them the rest of their life. It's just not right. America's going broke and we need to wake up. I'm going to fight to stop the payment of the congressional leaders. When your term's up, your pay's up. And that's the way it should be. We're paying hundreds and thousands of people all this money. We're going broke. America is going broke and we need to wake up and save it.
Thank you.
Ann, can I add something?
Sure.
Thank
David
you.
Richter?
I'm glad Congressman Kim brought up our state's $20 billion annual deficit of payments with the federal government. It's a disgrace. We are the 49th out of 50 states for how much money we get from the federal government relative to how much we send down there. But the answer is not a bailout. The reality is we could bring more money into the 3rd district from the federal government through higher spending on the joint base. Congressman Kim has not gotten that done. We could bring more infrastructure investment into the 3rd district for roads and highways and coastal restoration. Congressman Kim hasn't gotten that done. It's very tough for him to complain about the status quo when he is the current congressman for this district.
Okay, thank you very much. Andy Kim, go ahead, rebuttal.
I have been able to bring through what's called the National Defense Authorization Act, millions of dollars back into this district for investments in the joint base, also investments into local businesses here that support our national defense. So that is just absolutely untrue. And this is something that we can do while we also give our troops the biggest pay raise that they've gotten in over a decade. You know, this is about making sure that we spend it in the right places. So yes, we need to make sure that we are getting funding back to New Jersey. But it isn't just about these steps about infrastructure and joint base. It's also about making sure that we're dealing with our schools and getting that kind of support too. So that's what I'll be fighting for.
Thank you. The next question is about housing discrimination. I have a little bit of a background, couple of sentences here to read first. Affirmatively furthering fair housing, AFFH, was a provision of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. Under President Obama, HUD established the AFFH rule, which was meant to combat housing discrimination by requiring jurisdictions that receive federal housing funds to document patterns of racial bias and set goals to reduce segregation. In July 2020, the AFFH rule was abandoned by the administration. The question is, do you support the strategy for suburban rezoning through the AFFH? If so, will you encourage waterfront, ocean, barrier island, and suburban communities to comply? If not, by what means will you combat racial segregation? Andy Kim, it goes to you first.
Well, we absolutely need to make sure that we are combating racial discrimination when it comes to housing. And a big part of that is by understanding the problem. That is what that provision was for, helping us understand the challenges that are out there. Where are we seeing racial bias and discrimination when it comes to housing? So absolutely think that this needs to be a big part of our efforts when it comes to developing communities all over the district, all over the state, all over the country, to be able to make sure gets back to an earlier question of addressing the systemic racism and inequality in our country, making sure that we are taking the real tactical and tangible steps that will make a difference. I know that this is something that has helped a lot of people and helped a lot of communities understand the magnitude of the problem, but if you are not documenting it, if you are not researching it and requiring that type of data, that's when you just try to sweep it under the rug and pretend like this is not a problem. So this is something that's important. It starts with acknowledging the problem, researching it, documenting it, and then working together on how we can address it. So this is something that I will support going forward.
Thank you. Martin Weber?
I would support it too. It's rough on the housing in this country. I guess the beginning of the summer, I even took a trip to Center City, Philadelphia, just to see what it was like in what they would call the slums. And I was walking around there and I was talking to a lot of the individuals that were living in the homes. It was relatively most Black people in this area. And I got to talk to a lot of them. And one guy that was moving out, he came out of his house and chatted with me. And I asked him what it was like. And he says, it's awful. There's no fairness. There's these buildings, these homes that we're living in. And I move out. It's not even suitable to live in now, he says. And he showed me his place. And he says, I'm moving out the same day you're moving people back in. It's not fair. These political leaders in certain areas are just being paid by these landlords that just don't do nothing. And we're not helping them out that way. If we could control that, make it nicer so it's fair for everyone across the board. The new COs that you would have to get for the building and things like that, it's not being done. It's awful in some of these cities. It's sad to see what they're going through. And I would love to be able to help that too, where we could try to make that fair again for these individuals living in the cities that are really run down. Atlantic City, Philadelphia, Newark. We need to make it fair, and we need to clean up the buildings and keep it that way and make it the same way as it is out here where I live, where you get a CO before you move in there.
Thank you very much. David Richter?
Yeah, my family moved to Willingboro when I was 5 years old. And we moved there because it was pretty much the only community in South Jersey where my parents could afford to buy a house. And if you know anything about the history of Willingboro, it was really a creation of housing discrimination. Because when African Americans wanted to move out of Philadelphia or out of Camden or other urban areas and move to the suburbs and have, that their share of the American dream of owning a home. Realtors used to push them away from the wealthier communities, the whiter communities, and would always steer them into Willingboro. And Willingboro, when I was young, became a heavily minority community. It's even more so today. But housing discrimination is wrong. That was wrong then, and it's wrong now. And that was a law that was very important to make sure that realtors and developers and property owners don't discriminate against people on the basis of race or for any other reason. I believe very strongly that we are a nation of equality, of equal opportunity. One of the projects that I worked on in the private sector was the Supreme Court building, and right over the front door as you walk in, it says equal protection under law. That's incredibly important. It's something I want to fight for in Congress and fight for all Americans. And yes, the answer to your question is yes. That's something that we need to make sure that people can live free of discrimination.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen, I'd like to tell you this is the last question of the evening due to timing, but there is still one more. What should the federal government do to close the economic and wealth gap that continues to grow in the United States? What, if any, specific steps will you take to address issues of women's equality? Begin with Martin Weber.
We should be equal across the board, women, men. It doesn't matter who we are. If we're white, black, if we're a female, male, if we're gay, straight, it doesn't matter. Everything should be equal across the board. Pay-wise, it's sad what's going on. I think it's a lot of discrimination on things in this world. We just need to make it fair again. Everything's about the higher class and they get what they want, and people down here, they don't get what they want. It shouldn't be that way. It should be straight across the line for everybody in America. We're all human beings. We need to fight for the human being and just make it fair for everybody, no matter if you're wealthy or poor. People deserve to live in a home. They deserve to have a nice job, so forth. And I'm telling you, once I get to DC, I'm going to start making things fair for everyone. The elite shouldn't get something better than the poor. And we need to stop that and make everything women, men, it should be equal across the line.
Thank you. David Richter?
Yeah, on the equality, the income equality issue. The Democratic Party has headed sharply left, certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, actually advocating socialism outright. They used to complain that Republicans would call them socialists as an insult, but now they readily accept that that's where they want their party to head. And that's the wrong economic solution for our country. It's not about tearing down the people at the top. It's about lifting up the people at the bottom, providing them opportunity. And the reality is there's been no better cure for poverty in the history of the world than capitalism and free enterprise. And I think that we need to do things to make sure that the economy is growing. We need to make sure we cut that wasteful government spending you talked about earlier. We need low taxation to make sure that there's opportunity in the private sector for businesses and entrepreneurs to grow their businesses, to create more employment, to provide jobs for people that need them and good paying jobs. That's incredibly important. And on the second topic you asked about, I'm a husband and I'm the father of 4 teenage daughters. I care very much about the opportunities in our society for women, that they have every opportunity in life that the men have, that they're protected from discrimination, that they're afforded every single thing that a man has the opportunity to achieve in life. That's important to me because I expect my daughters to be very successful in life. I don't want anything holding them back.
Thank you. Andy Kim.
Listening to you about inequality in our nation is really at the fundamental core of so many of the problems that we face. And the first thing that it requires to be able to tackle inequality is to recognize that it is a problem. I'll have to tell you, I was a little shocked when I read a line in a Star Ledger article the other day that quoted my opponent, David Richter. He said, "I don't think inequality in and of itself is an issue." I disagree with that fundamentally. Even before the coronavirus crisis, we had 40% of Americans that couldn't handle a $400 emergency. That statistic is now bearing out in real life. the efforts we're trying to do with the Paycheck Protection Program, unemployment insurance. These are steps that we're trying to do to make sure we don't have a world that is even more unequal than it was before the pandemic. But unfortunately, that is the direction that we're trying to go. You know, for me, I agree. We got to make sure that we are investing in our businesses and our capital. In fact, I'm the chairman of the subcommittee in small business on access to capital. So I want to make sure we're doing that. But while I do that, I held a hearing on what we can do to help access to capital to minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and women-owned businesses, making sure we can have that equal footing. This is why I supported earlier this year, extended the deadline so we can get the Equal Rights Amendment passed through, make sure we can take these steps to really codify this within our Constitution, within the fabric of our nation. So this is something that I will continue to fight for, try to address, whether with the coronavirus relief that we're trying to do, whether it's about gender equality or racial equality. I am committed to fighting for equal rights and equality at every level of our country.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to thank those residents that submitted questions for this evening. More questions were submitted than we had time to include due to our available limited time frame. An attempt was made to consolidate questions wherever possible. We will now have the candidates' closing statements, beginning with Andy Kim.
Thank you again for joining us tonight. Thank you everyone for watching. I want to close with a story that has really framed my thinking about my job in the past few months. I brought my 2 baby boys down to DC before the pandemic, and I brought them to the House floor, where I was able to introduce them to my hero, John Lewis, and others. And as I was walking back from the Capitol, back to my office, I turned to them. I said, "Did you like the Capitol? Did you have fun at the Capitol?" And my then 4-year-old turned to me and said, "I love the Capitol, and lowercase too." And it took me a second to understand what he was saying. And it made me recognize that he doesn't actually understand the Capitol building or the job that I had. But a couple weeks later at my son's daycare, the teacher asked the different kids to go around and ask them what their parents did, just to get them to talk. And when it got to my son, she asked him, "What does your dad do?" And he said, "My dad tries to help people." And I was really touched when the teacher told me that story, because somehow along the way of the work that I do and the efforts that I try to do, he has somehow distilled the core essence of what it means to be a representative of this country. It's about helping people. I will continue to do that every single day. I've served my country and my community every moment of my professional career, having done so under both Republicans and Democrats, trying to make sure that we deliver. I'm going to continue to do that for this community where I went to kindergarten, where my kid's going to go to kindergarten next year. I love this community, and it has given my family everything, and I'm going to give it back everything. I'm a workhorse, not a show horse. I'm not getting caught up in the partisanship and the hyper-partisanship. I'm not some knife fighter or flamethrower. It's about trying to find real solutions to the problems that we face. I hope you've seen through the work that I've done over the last 2 years, my dedication and my professionalism to this job, trying to build these bridges, trying to work together to be able to solve the problems that we face. Are we going to be able to solve them all overnight? Of course not. It requires sustained effort and really trying to make sure we're following through in that type of way. But you know that you have my word that I'll give it everything I got. Thank you, and I hope to have your support again.
Thank you. David Richter.
Thank you for hosting this forum, and thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. We have a really important decision to make. Congressman Kim is the incumbent, and the decision we have to make is whether or not he's earned another 2 years in the House as the representative for the 3rd District, and I don't believe that he has. 2 years ago, he campaigned on a whole series of promises that he has not kept. He promised that he was not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, that the Democrats in the House needed new leadership. And of course, he broke that promise in his very first vote in the House. He promised he was going to be a moderate voice for South Jersey. And yet he went down to DC and joined the Progressive Caucus, a group co-founded by Bernie Sanders that AOC and Ilhan Omar and the rest of the squad are members of, that is anything but a moderate group. This is a group so radically left that 60% of Democrats in the House have refused to join it, and 100% of Senate Democrats have refused to join it. And yet Andy Kim is a member. That is not a moderate group, and that's not being a moderate for the voters of the 3rd District. I spent my life in the private sector getting things done, and I want to accomplish a lot of things in the House for the voters in this district. exact opposite of the Progressive Caucus is something called the Problem Solvers Caucus. It is a bipartisan group, half Democrats and half Republicans, and I intend to join it when I get down to Capitol Hill. That's where real bipartisanship happens. And I want to accomplish things for this district. You can see by looking around you what's been accomplished in the last 2 years with Congressman Kim representing you. Very little, a lot of talk, but very few results. And when I ran a business, I couldn't just talk about what I was going to do. I actually had to deliver. And I'm going to fight in Congress for the people of this district. I'm going to work to rebuild the economy. I'm going to work to bring jobs to the third district. Those are critically important and necessary right now. I'm going to small business. And with coming against you every day, that's incredibly important. But I'm going to fight for working families in South Jersey. I want my family to be successful. I want your family to be successful as well. Thank you tonight. I really appreciate you tuning in.
Thank you. Martin Weber.
I thank you for the opportunity to speak to the people. I wasn't running a lot of money. I'm not a very wealthy man. I live month to month, I could say. It's not like the money these two other candidates have that they were able to put in for TV commercials, signage. I ran my campaign on Jeff's life insurance. It's been tough. It's been hard. I've been a volunteer my whole life. And I promise the American people, when I take that seat in DC, I will fix the VA healthcare. I promise that from the bottom of my heart. It will get done. And within 4 years, I want to get term limits done. And the pay, when us congressional leaders get done, our pay is done too. We shouldn't have to continue on paying these people that do it. I'm going to work for the people. Like I said, I've been a volunteer. I still am a volunteer. I was a volunteer for the Red Cross when I was in the U.S. Army in Germany. I love putting back into the community. I'm moving on from my landscape. That's 30 years now. I want to serve the American people. I want to work for the U.S. veterans, and I want to try to make things so much better in America for us. It can get done. We need to start it now before it's too late. And I can't wait to fix the VA healthcare system. I will fix it. And good luck, guys. I think it's going to be hard for you to come after me. I'm in it with my heart. And we'll see. November 3rd. God bless everybody. God bless America. Thanks.
Thank you. I hope you found this event an informative one. Streaming of this recorded candidates forum will be available on YouTube, vote411.org, and LWVNJ Burlington County's Facebook page. I would like to remind you that the November election in New Jersey will all be vote by mail. All active registered voters in New Jersey have received vote by mail ballots. There's no need to apply for a vote by mail ballot. If a voter does not receive a vote by mail ballot, the voter may vote using a provisional ballot at the polls on election day. Please follow the instructions on the ballot carefully. Sign the certificate, but do not detach it. Plan to complete your ballot and return it as soon as possible. It must be postmarked by November 3rd, Election Day. Secure ballot drop boxes will be located throughout each county. Call your county's Board of Elections for their location. For detailed voting information, visit vote411.org and lwvnj.org. If you have any questions or voting concerns, call 1-800-792-VOTE. Thank you.